Good morning and welcome to Bible study. We're glad that you're with us this morning. You'll notice that since Franklin County is in purple, Scott and I are a little more distant than we normally would be, and also we are not having a guest here with us today. So we just pray that you are blessed by the Bible study and what we are doing. This Sunday is the first Sunday in Advent, and we have a new Advent sermon series called A New Day Dawning. And it is the idea that during Advent, not only do we wait for the birth of the baby in a manger, what was, we also live into what will be. And so a big piece of this is the second coming of Christ, who promised to come again. And so that New Day Dawning can be in the present. As each new day we get up and we recommit ourselves once again to the work of Jesus Christ. But it also is a new day dawning in that one day Christ will come again and all the suffering of this world will be over. So, Pastor Scott, if you would read for us this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bonnie. This is Mark 13, 24 to 37 today. But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey, when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore, keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake.
Thank you. This is a piece of what's called apocalyptic literature. And it's not meant to be taken literally at all. And if we did, it's kind of a frightening piece.
Yeah.
And it doesn't bring out the hope of the second coming, really, if we take it literally. So, Pastor Scott, is there anything in here that you were, that intrigued you?
I was kind of struck by the context. Thinking about how Jesus's context and when this gospel would have been written, which would have been just today, and how we hear it today, we don't have, we are not about to go into exile into Babylon. Our temple has not been destroyed. So I'm thinking about kind of the Jews who would have heard this and knew kind of the foreboding spirit of the text against how we hear it. And I don't know that I've arrived at a conclusion on that, but I'm thinking a lot about the context today. Yeah.
And you know, there's a piece of this because it certainly has a strong message about keeping alert and being ready for that time. That's really what Advent is about, is that anticipation, that preparation. Yeah. And I do believe that often when we get away from an event, the farther away that you get from it, the more complacent you get about it. Yeah. And I think for us, for them, and I have to think that this might have been a text that informed Paul, because Paul certainly lived his life day to day, every day, a new day dawning, he'd get up, and he would think again, today is the day, not today could be the day. Paul would think today is the day that Christ will come again. Right. Now, when Christ didn't come, Paul would get up the next day. For Paul, it was that way all through his life.
Right.
And I think as we have gotten away from it, we become more complacent. And that complacency then, we just really aren't living into the whole idea of when Christ comes again.
Yeah, to say today, keep awake, keep alert, I mean, I don't know that it resonates with us the way it would of Mark's audience. But I do think it means paying attention to what God is up to in the world, and then finding a way to become a part of that.
Right.
But often we hear it with a very foreboding, a very ominous sense that a warning, kind of get in line, or damned you'll be. And again, as you indicated, that's not the message of hope that ultimately all of the Gospels point to. So again, I'm kind of thinking about that. What does keep alert and keep awake mean to me?
Right.
And really, I think in that day and in our day, it really truly means being aware of what God is up to the ways of God in the world, and then again, finding a way to become a part of that unfolding kingdom. Yeah.
Well, and I think a part of it too is exactly what you're saying. It's being aware. We can live our lives oblivious to God and what God's doing in the world, and still call ourselves Christians. Now, I'm not judging anything, but it's that piece of being oblivious, and and that's what I think this is talking about. Don't be that way in the world, even now. Even though, as it says, because it says, but about that day or hour, no one knows. Not even the Son knows. And so we can say, well, then why do I have to live my life a certain way if we don't even know when Jesus is coming again? So it's like, because that's what we're called to do. We're called to live in the hope that Christ will come again. What I also appreciate is in verse 24, in those days after that suffering. This text does not take the suffering away from the world that we're in right now.
Right.
There is suffering. I mean, let's be real. There's suffering right now with this pandemic. And that the whole idea is that even if you believe in Jesus, if you live day to day believing that Jesus will come again, it isn't that suffering is taken away. It's that there's hope in the midst of the suffering.
Right. That's exactly it. And that to me is the point of Advent, is acknowledging, and Lent for that matter, acknowledging a world that is broken, that is hurting, that is in a lot of pain, but looking toward a hope that, like you alluded to, that is now with us and is yet to fully come.
Yes.
And that's an odd dichotomy that I think, as pastoral theologians, if you will, I know I struggle with how to talk about that liminal in between, that already but not yet. And my sermon on Sunday will kind of allude to that too, that we look to a hope that we know has come to earth in the form of Jesus. We know that God has reconciled the world to God's self, and yet this unfolding kingdom of God has not fully been realized. And so, we live in a world of suffering. I do think, if anything, this text has an immediacy to it, that in a pandemic in 2020, we maybe get that in a way that we haven't in past years. We feel like we don't know what next week will bring.
We don't know what this afternoon will bring. Exactly. But to that point.
And it feels very, every week I watch the news and I hear Governor DeWine and newscasters talk about not only the rising cases, but deaths and hospitalizations and worn out healthcare staff, and it truly feels kind of like an apocalyptic time. And yet, I haven't given up all hope, and I don't think anyone has.
Yeah.
We know vaccines are being produced even now. We know that hope is on the horizon, but yet we still have this long winter ahead of us. So I really kind of see a parallel in this sense of immediacy of Mark and living not in a bubble,
Yes.
but with maybe a dependence on God
Yes.
that we need to have.
And I think this is a great reminder of our dependence on God.
Yeah.
That it's not we ourselves who do this, but we depend on God.
Right.
I do want to point out verse 30, because I'm sure, and I've heard this question before when we've been in person with Bible study, and it just is one I think that people get confused by. Verse 30 says this, "Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place." And the question, we take it literally again.
Yeah.
And we think, well, if it was that generation, they're all gone.
Yeah.
So has it happened already and we didn't know about it?
Yeah.
But really, that's not what Mark is talking about here. Mark is talking about it's all the followers of Jesus. And as long as the movement continues in the world, as long as Christ-like people move about in the world, the generation is still alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not literally one generation, but it is this generation of people who believe and follow Jesus. Absolutely.
Yeah. I wanted to move into where we find hope in the text.
Yes.
And not to put you on the spot, I'll begin with my own sense of how I find hope in the text. And in this, at the end, a metaphor is used about the master of the house. And so if the master of the house is God, I believe that God's purpose, God's intent with the world is always to continually right the wrongs and heal the world of suffering. Like you said, it's not to take away that suffering, but we believe in a God who is working all things for the good of those who believe in him. And so I do find hope in this, knowing that even though suffering and pain and persecution and all these things exist, we believe in a God who is at work even as we can't see it, righting the wrongs.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that is the hope that we live in. I do believe this, that if we listen to the world gives us a very pessimistic view of what's going on. The world would give us a view that everything is doom and gloom. We talked about this last night we had a Zoom group last night and had a racial reconciliation discussion. And the piece there was with the doom and gloom, and I've lost my train of thought now, and I don't know why. If we listen to the world, well, anyhow, if we listen to the world, we get that message that things are not all right, and here it is, that everything is, that all of the resources that God has given to us are in limited supply. That's what we talked about last night.
Yeah.
And the reality is it's not in limited supply, but the world would have us believe that. God would say over and over and over again that there's an abundant supply of resources.
Yeah.
The question is, what resources are you looking for?
Yeah.
What resources are you looking for? Like grace comes in abundance.
Yeah.
That forgiveness comes in abundance. Love comes in abundance. But if we're looking for wealth or power, those are limited because they're of this world.
Right.
So the abundance comes in when we look to God. And the piece I think that this is saying too is that we have the ability to change. That we're not stuck in a way of being that today we can say, I truly want to commit myself to every day seeing a new day dawning, that to every day look to that second coming of Christ and to be joy-filled in the midst of that.
Right, right. Bishop Allende, Abraham Allende in Northeast Ohio, he used to talk about exactly that point about how congregations typically focus on what they don't have enough of, scarcity thinking.
Right.
And he would always point to the abundance of God, you know, for a church council, not to look at all that they don't have, but to look at the abundance of faith and talents and so forth that they have. And that always struck me as, it's very human to think of what we don't have, or to go to the negative. And instead of focusing on all that God is doing and providing.
Right.
But it's not wealth. It's not the worldly things that we often think that we need immediately.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, if you want a garage full of cars, have at it. But, you know, when Christ comes again, those aren't going to mean anything.
Right.
They aren't going to mean anything.
Right. Well, I think that's a good spot to conclude at.
I think so too.
Thank you all, as always, for being with us on Online Bible Study. Send along any questions, thoughts, comments that you might have. We'd love to continue the dialogue with you in any way that we can. We also will have a Thanksgiving service on YouTube at 10 a.m. Thanksgiving Day, and we hope to continue to connect with you in the coming days. Be blessed, be safe, have a good week.